Okay guys, tonight's homework is page 71 through 72 of your student journal, and we're going to do exploration 2. We're going to do letters A through D, and then we're going to do numbers 3 and 4. All of these problems come from the Big Idea math book. I'm just showing you how to do them. Okay, so it says use the exploration 1 to write conjectures about the following pairs of angles formed by the two parallel lines and a transversal. Well, I'm going to go here and highlight the parallel lines for you so we can, these are the parallel lines, and these here, this line that I'm going to highlight in yellow is called the transversal. This is the transversal. Okay, so, and the symbol for parallel, if you notice, they have these little arrows. That means these lines are parallel, and this is your transversal here. All right, so corresponding angles. We want to go and find the corresponding angles here. So we already know 1 is to the left of this line and 5 is to the left of this line. So we're going to say 1, the measure of angle 1 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 5. I can also say 2 is to the right of this parallel line, and if I look at the other parallel line, 6 is to the right of it. So I can say the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 6. I can say the same reasoning for 4. 4 is to the left of the parallel line, and 8 is to the left of the parallel line. So I can say the measure of 4 is congruent to the measure of 8. Here, I can say 3 is to the right of the parallel line, the first parallel line, and 7 is to the right of the other parallel line. So the measure of angle 3 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 7. Alrighty, so now let's go to the alternate interior angles. So we know these lines are parallel, that's the symbol for parallel, and this line here is the transversal. If we look, it said alternate interior, so it means interior means to go to the inside of the parallel lines, go to the inside and look for the alternate line side angles on of the transversal. So I'm going to highlight the transversal in yellow, and I want to go look for the alternate angles inside of the two parallel lines. So I can say the measure of angle 3 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 5. If I look at 2 and 8, they're inside the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So I say the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 8. So we're done with that one. Let's go to the next one. Now we have alternate exterior angles. So now I need to go to the outside, because exterior means outside of the parallel lines, and I want to go to opposite sides of the transversal. So the measure of angle 7 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 1, and you can highlight this. And then the measure of angle 4 is congruent to the measure of angle 6. Alternate, they're outside of the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. And we're done with that one. Okay, so consecutive interior angles, or that's a good name for it too, one after the other. I like to call them same side of the transversal. That's what I like to call them, but consecutive works too. So angles that are on the same side of the transversal. Your transversal here is in yellow, and we want to grab those angles that are on the same side of the transversal. So I'm going to say the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 5 should equal 180. They're right beside each other and they're on the same side of the transversal. I can say the same exact thing for the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 6 should also be 180. If I go back inside the parallel lines, these two angles are right one behind each other. So I'm going to say the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 8 is also 180 degrees. And the rule here, same side of the transversal, you call it ST. And then the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 7 is also equal to 180. Same side of the transversal. And we're done with that one. Okay, it says when two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, which of the resulting pairs of angles are congruent? So if we go here, I'm going to draw my two parallel lines, and I'm going to go ahead and put the parallel symbols in there so people will know these lines are parallel. And then I'm going to go and draw my transversal, which will cut this line. I'm going to call this angle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to go quickly and knock out some of these rules. Okay, so I'm going to go to the inside of the lines first, and I'm going to say the measure of angle 3 is congruent to the measure of angle 6, and they're called alternate interior angles. It says which of the resulting angles are congruent, right? So I'm going to go to the measure of angle 4 is congruent to the measure of angle 5 because they are alternate interior angles. They're on the inside of the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to say the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 6. This up here is at the top of the first parallel line, and this one at the bottom is at the top of this line. So that means the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 6, and we're going to call those corresponding angles. We're also going to say the measure of angle 4 is at the bottom of the first line, and 8 down here is at the bottom of the first line. So I want to say the measure of angle 4 is congruent to the measure of angle 8, and that's corresponding angles. If I knock out on this side, I want to say the measure of angle 1 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 5. And I'm going to write it down here in this box, guys. Measure of angle 1 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 5 for the same reason. Corresponding angles, top of the first line, top of the second line. The measure of angle 3 is congruent to the measure of angle 7, top of the bottom of the first line, bottom of the second line. That's corresponding angles. Okay, the measure of angle, I already did the middle, so the middle is good. So now I just go knock out these vertical angles. The measure of angle 1 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 4 vertical angles. This goes the same for the measure of angle 2. It's going to be congruent to the measure of angle 3 vertical angle. Measure of angle 5 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 8, another vertical angle. Let's keep that going. And then we get the measure of angle 6 is going to be congruent to the measure of angle 7, another vertical angle. And we're done. And there are other conclusions you can make. One, if 1 is congruent to 4 and 4 is the same as 5, then 5 is the same as 8. Vertical angles, alternate interior angles, vertical angles again. You can make the same conclusion right here. 2 is the same as 3, vertical angles. 3 is the same as 6, alternate interior angles. And 6 is the same as 7. So a lot of these angles in here are the same. The second question says, in exploration 2, the measure of angle 1 is 80. Find the other angles. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw this again. I'm going to draw my parallel lines, and I'm going to stick the transversal right here. And you notice I put the marks for parallel so that anybody that reads this know that these are parallel lines. So I'm going to name these angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to go and put the measurements in. It said the measure of angle 1 is actually 80. Well, if I know 1 is 80, I also know that 4 is 80. And by vertical angles, if I know that 4 is equal to 80, then I also know 5 is equal to 80 because that's called alternate interior angles. And if 5 is equal to 80, so is 8. And those are called vertical angles. So now I'm going to go back and I have to use some math now. So I know that there's a lot of ways you can approach this. You can approach same side of the transversal rules, or you can approach it with linear pairs. So if you know that 1 and 2 are linear pairs, and this is 80, these two angles have to add to equal 180. So that means this one is 100, and then I know that this is going to be congruent by vertical angles, so the measure of angle 3 is 100. 3 is congruent to 6 by alternate interior angles, and 6 is congruent to 7 by vertical angles. And we're finished. All right, I will see you guys on tomorrow. Bye.